Hey everybody, welcome to week 13. Hey, last couple weeks we've been taking a look at some of the central causes for the American Civil War, and hopefully by this point you have a decent understanding of the various nuances that caused the war, and that was my intention, hopefully, to get you to think that that the war was caused by a multitude of issues and not just one particular thing, although you may have concluded that one of the causes was more important than the others. But the idea is that the war was far more complex than just boiling it down to what we call a binary, this or that. And so what we're going to do this week and continue on into next week is we're going to look at the war itself. Now this week we're going to look at the first 2.5 years of the war, which started in 1861, continued through 62, and into 1863. And during these first couple years of the war, although the Confederacy will eventually lose the war in April of 1865 when they finally surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, hindsight tells us by the fact that they didn't have much industrialization, they didn't have the amount of railroads that they needed, they didn't have the manpower to continue to fight the good fight. The reality is that during the first couple years of this war, the Confederacy definitely had the stronger of the two armies, and we're going to be talking about some of the advantages and disadvantages that both sides had. But for the most part, for these first couple years, it definitely looked as if the Confederacy could win and was on the verge in many cases of actually winning the war. The year 1863 will be a turning point, but we'll be getting to the turning point, if you will, in next week. So, but this week we're going to take a look at the one event that really sort of caused or sparked the war, and that, of course, is the attack at Fort Sumter. Although we may have actually mentioned that last week, but just as a reminder, then the attack at Fort Sumter did inaugurate Civil War. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. And then, of course, the country will mobilize for war under President Abraham Lincoln. And so we'll talk about what Lincoln's response was to that attack, what Lincoln's response was to the Southern secession. And, of course, there were a number of states that had seceded from the Union even before Lincoln became president, in fact. But more will leave the Union following the attack on Fort Sumter and Lincoln's response. Okay, we'll also be taking a look at some of the key battles during 1861 and 1862. This would include the First and Second Battle of Bull Run, the Battle of Antietam, also known as the Battle of Sharpsburg. In fact, Northern and Southerners named battles differently, so oftentimes battles will have more than one name. And indeed, the Battle of Antietam is really significant because it is the battle that really convinces Lincoln that he should issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which is also something that we will talk about. The Emancipation Proclamation, of course, is a pivotal moment in American history where the war becomes something more than just the preservation of the Union. It now is, as Lincoln would say in his Gettysburg Address, a war for a new birth of freedom. Although the Emancipation itself did not actually free any slaves, it did motivate a number of slaves to flee the South, and it put the war again on the new trajectory. So lots of things we're going to be talking about this week. Next week we'll get into some of the more, I guess, climactic battles, things like the Battle of Vicksburg and Gettysburg and Sherman's March to the Sea, kind of the drama of the Civil War battles, if you will. But for this week, that's what we're going to look at. Of course, you've got your discussion boards due. Of course, you also have your second PowerPoint coming up within a couple weeks, I think 2 or 3 weeks. So you might want to be thinking about what topics you'd like to do for that. Obviously, the Civil War is a big one that you could look at, but there's a lot of fantastic topics that you can assess in the second part of American history, which would be 1824 up to 1877. So try to think a little bit more creatively about what those topics might be. But at any rate, if you have questions, contact me. As always, I'll get back to you. Otherwise, go in peace, be warm and filled. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper, and may the odds forever be in your favor. Have a blessed week, guys.